So this week, I'm thinking about the power of a slow start. In fact, I'm thinking about how loud January can be. Everyone's talking about speed, goals, urgency. Gotta get to the gym, gotta do this, gotta do that, gotta get back to work, got to catch up on all the work I missed, got to, for those that worked through the holidays, get everything tied up so that we can launch into the new year. But last January, I decided to be strategic. I decided to choose to slow down my first 90 days. Now, 2025 had a lot of interesting stuff in it, a lot of shitty stuff in it. And that's okay because it's life, and life is filled with uncertainty and chaos. And yes, SHIT. But slowing down those first 90 days did help me recognize that slowness isn't weakness. It can be strategy. And I have to say, last year I wasn't as strategic as I could have been, but this year, from the lessons learned from last year, I can be. I think there's a myth about the turn of the new year. And I think it's the idea that January has to be an active start because we have to kind of get in with the new and leave behind the old. And I think the pressure comes from the culture. The pressure comes also from the transition. There seems to be this harsh thing where, we ring in the new year at midnight, we clink our glasses, and then when we wake up, the reality of January 1st is, now we got to get going. But sometimes that urgency can be confused with leadership because it feels like we are leading ourselves, we're leading others into the new year with vim and vigor. But speed can cost us clarity. I know because it costs and has cost me clarity. I made some decisions in 2024 and 2025, very speedy decisions that cost me greatly. And I'm not talking just about emotionally costing me, I'm talking about financially. I made some financial missteps that really cost me. And it was my need for speed that blurred my judgment, that meant that I made decisions that weren't as fiscally sound, that also weren't as realistic. And the urgency had me believing something was happening that actually wasn't. So when we rush, we can skip important parts of building strategy. First and foremost, we don't have time to reflect. And we don't have time to listen to ourselves, but listen to things around us. For me, I am often the one doing the talking. And the listening is sometimes a part of what I rush because I feel like, well, but my voice has to be heard, or I need my voice to be active and out there. And in reality, I should reflect more. I should listen to myself and to others before I spout out with what I think or with what I say. It's not that I'm going to change my opinion because I might not, but it's about how I might shape my sharing my opinion based on more reflection and listening more. The other thing that I think is important to do that we don't want to rush is checking our energy. If our energy to make decisions quickly is because we're afraid. Fear is never a really strong position to be in to make a decision. In fact, it's the weakest position to be in. And we do need to ask ourselves, do I have the right energy to make this choice? Because emotions can cloud our judgment. In fact, when we're emotional, what's going on in our brain, those emotions, those chemical reactions that create emotions can prohibit our ability to really recognize up here in our prefrontal cortex logical and reasoning capabilities. And if your logic and your reasoning is skewed because of emotion, like fear, you can make some missteps. I did in 2025. I will likely continue to do that, but I want to learn from the lessons in the past. And I think sometimes we rush choices and decisions because we're trying to get things done. We don't want to leave anything unfinished. The problem is that sometimes in our rush to close things out, we can make judgment calls that aren't fully informed. I know I do that. And so slowing down can be a really helpful thing. What a slow start can help us do, or what it can make possible, is discernment, better decision making. It can also create a more sustainable pace. I love to go fast. I love to go fast. I love to be busy. When I look at my calendar and I see all this opportunity, it gets me excited. And when I am living my calendar, when I am like hopping from city to city, flight to flight, going, 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 I love the energy. However, it's not always a sustainable pace. In fact, oftentimes it's the opposite. It's an unsustainable pace. And I feel like I've kind of gotten myself on some sort of ride that I can't get off of. And that's when I recognize my leadership can actually be not at the forefront. My conscious, you know, showing up, being present, and wanting to think about my emotions, my feelings, and the emotions and the feelings of others, that's not at the forefront. And that's really dangerous, dangerous territory. We as leaders need to be models. We need to be models of making good conscious decisions. And that means discerning, creating a pace that's sustainable, taking care of ourselves. And that means self-care, that means physical, emotional, spiritual, all of those things. It's the holistic, the whole body experience. And we need a model that those things matter to us so that those that we are leading or attempting to lead recognize that those are things that they need to care about. Um, the challenge is that our focus and our actions don't always convey that. I know for me, sometimes I just make it look like it's easy. And quite honestly, it's not easy, but I make it look easy because I'm just going, 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 going. And I have other people say, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, it feels like it's a lot. Like, is that sustainable? Is that healthy for you? And I'm like, go, go, go. What am I modeling for others? As leaders, we are being followed. So it's important to be conscious about that. So, my newsletter this week. Uh, I'm thinking about this. I'm writing about it. I've been getting my mind around how do I want to do this slow start to January and 2026 in general. I don't want slow to feel like I'm stuck. I want slow to feel like I'm being intentional. So slow for me is going to mean, yeah, I'm not going to get upset with myself when I decide to turn off the laptop and grab a book for half an hour. I'm not going to be upset with myself when I maybe don't hit all my goals for what I want to write, what I want to talk about, what I want to do, where I want to speak, where I want my voice to be heard. I want slow to equal leadership choices, but not theatrics. Because sometimes I can feel like I am literally going through the motions, creating an environment that looks more sustainable than it actually is. I don't really want to do that because in the past I've done that. And what I realize is that that's led people astray. It's made them feel first and foremost bad about themselves because they can't keep up with the pace that I can keep up with, even though I may not actually be able to keep up with it. And any lack of authenticity is stuff I want to leave in the past. Last year, 2025, when I had this slow start, this first 90 days, when I kind of took the solstice calendar and recognized I want to be in this quiet, in this darkness at this time of year. What I learned was I have pretended to not, or excuse me, I had pretended other years to be at a higher pace than I could feel on the inside. And that meant others, they did it. And they felt horrible about themselves, but they were too ashamed, perhaps even to share that with me because I made it look like I didn't need the same self-care or the same rest. When in reality, I did. I was going through the motions. It was theater. It wasn't sincere. So I want to ask you a question because it's a question I'm asking myself. And that is, what would change if you gave yourself permission to start slowly on purpose? And what would that look like? What would it look like if you were going to start slowly for 2026 and do it intentionally? So for me, I gave you the example. I'm reading. I love to read, but I don't always read for pleasure. I read for work. And the problem with that is that the self-care piece doesn't get teased the same way because reading for pleasure allows me to actually invest in the words on the page, to escape, to feel like I'm having a bit of a vacation from my daily life. And that's a self-care piece that I'm going to work on. What does that mean? It means that a little bit of time to read needs to be carved into every day. And it needs to fit within the pace that feels more sustainable for me. That's not me putting in a 12-hour workday where I just work, 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 work the whole time. For instance, a couple of years ago, I read Cal Newport's book on deep work. It's a wonderful book. I highly encourage you to do it. And what I recognize is going into sessions of deep work where I close my world in, I focus, and for 2 to 3 hours at the most, I just plug away. And then I turn that off and I go and do other things. That can be really helpful. So I may get a 12-hour output of a day, but I may have only actually had maybe two deep work sessions to get me there, which means the output is what I could have done in 12, but the actual time invested is more like 4 to 6 hours. That's a really great way for me to slow down and to focus and to do it on purpose. So, if what I'm saying resonates at all, I would encourage you to read my full reflection. It's in this week's newsletter, The Feisty Reset. And my newsletter, that's been going for years now, is on LinkedIn. Look below. Below, I have linked a subscribe button so that you can subscribe to the newsletter. And yeah, think about how you might consider a slower start to the new year. I wish you all the best. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week for Feisty Fridays.